Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Mona Lisa Roy Chaudhary and I'll be doing Module 9. The title of the module is Women as Perpetrators of Violence. Women has been considered caretakers, caregivers, but it has been seen that women has also been perpetrators of violence. There are several examples to show how woman has been cruel enough to kill children, to kill men and women when they became real, violent and of course a part of war. In different roles, women play in war and conflict, the role of a mother, daughter, wife. Woman is seen mostly either as victims or a part of the state missionary, but then in a very reluctant manner. They never wanted to be a part of war. But that is a general view. Woman has rarely been looked upon as an active agent of war and violence. The general perception is that women are victims during war and conflict, and violence on women has been perpetrated by men. The assumption is being questioned now because there are evidences that show that women were perpetrators of violence. In case of civil war in Sierra Leone has demonstrated the fact that woman has been involved in sexual crimes, especially gang rapes, as perpetrators. Thus, in recent time, however, woman as a perpetrator of violence in war has grabbed the attention of the international community and academia. During the Hitler regime, more than 3,500 women worked as guards in the concentration camps, and they were responsible for much of the violence that the prisoners faced during that time. About 60 female camp guards stood trial under the War Crimes Tribunal between 1945 to 1949, and many of them were described to be extremely brutal. A total of 21 of them were executed. However, the very recent incidents of genocide in Rwanda in 1994 and the prison photographs of women soldiers in Abu Ghraib, the American prisoners who were there in Iraq, have generated discussions about women as violent agents. Now, to understand how a woman can be a perpetrator has become a topic of study. Now, the woman's role during the periods of mass violence must be taken into account, their roles as administrative and supporting personnel. During the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, many women working in the governmental organization played key roles in identifying and rounding up Jews, transporting and holding them prisoners in one of the concentration camps, and finally killing them. So the people who were doing that work were women. So the Nazi Holocaust has been qualified as a bureaucratic mass murder. Hilberg pointed out that many people, including a large number of women, did not actively shoot Jews or pour gas into the chambers. They were involving in planning of the genocide. So they destroyed the whole lot of people by just sitting at their desk. The discussion trying to understand women as perpetrators has been on three fronts: the individual, the system, and the woman's capacity for violence. Now, first let us come to the first point, the individual. Woman as an individual. The analysis of individual woman perpetrators looks at the psychological makeup of the individual woman perpetrators and tries to find a reason behind her behavior. So, the perpetrators are then looked as an aberration or cases of bad apples. Often personal motives, like a woman having to prove herself in her military career, or likelihood she had a childhood trauma, linked to individual perpetrators to understand their behavior. The difficulty of looking at women as perpetrators as a problem of the individual is that it does not look into the system within the military which empowers and encourages its personnel to be violent regardless whether one is a male or a female. Related to this, we can draw an example of the blonde German housewife Emma Petri. While she was returning home from shopping, she could see, like she saw 6 young children huddled in terror. There were 6 naked boys, and married to a senior SS officer, this young 23-year-old woman knew who they were. So, being mother of 2 children, she brought 6 of them home. She fed them and then took them to a nearby pit in the woods and lined them up. And she shot them one by one in the back of their neck. The schizophrenic combination of a warm-hearted mother 1 minute and cold-blooded killer the next is the enigma, and one that now revealed in a new book based on years of trawling through the archives puts a crueler than ever role of a woman who participated in this kind of incidents. The Holocaust has generally been seen as a crime perpetrated by men. The vast majority of this accused at Nuremberg and other war crime trials were men. The few women ever called to account were notorious concentration camp guards. The few women ever called to account were notorious concentration camp guards, the likes of Irma Gries and Isle Koch, whose evil was so extreme that they could be explained away as freaks and beasts and not really women at all. The next point is the system. After individual, we come to the system. So, the second analysis moves away from individual and looks at the system of the military as being the source of the problem. It examines the woman as a victim or an unwilling pawn at the hands of the patriarchal military system, where the woman merely carries out orders given by their male superiors. In this analysis, the woman perpetrators retains what has been a age-old belief in her innate feminine, maternal and compassionate nature. Her acts of violence are then seen as manipulation of power-hungry, brutal male. The woman remains passive. She works according to the orders of her male colleague. There is another example where desperate Jewish parents approached Bloch because she was a woman asking for help, assuming that she would be sympathetic. But she would use her pram to, just crush the Jews whom she encountered in the streets. And it is said that she actually crushed a Jewish young boy. Such treatment is an affront to any sense of humanity, let alone womanhood. All the more so because most of these crimes went unpunished. No, they were not accounted for the kind of violence that they had created. So, we see how the system worked while helping, or in a way helping the woman as perpetrators. They were never tried, they were never kind of punished for what they had been doing. The third analysis is popular with many feminists, and it looks into the agency of woman in being a perpetrator of genocide and sexual violence. And it argues that faced with self-threat or that the enemy other, woman can be genocidal and commit sexual assault on their own. The analysis argues that the maternal peacemaking nature assigned to woman is a gendered construct, and women are capable of violence as men are capable of peacemaking. You cannot just kind of have a gender divide or watertight compartments. It can be the other way around, like men as peacekeepers and women as perpetrators of violence. Wendy Lohr, in her book Hitler's Furies, described the role of woman that woman played during the time of Hitler in killing the Jews. She mentions in her book that the names of Lisle Williams, wife of the camp commandant, who used to sit on the balcony of their house and take pot shots at the Jewish prisoners with her rifle. Vera Wuflow in Poland, who sat by her husband in the front seat of the lorry that led the convoy of killers to the town, and stood in the market square brandishing a whip, as nearly 1,000 who resisted the roundup or collapsed in summer heat were beaten to death or shot. So we can see how women can also be so cruel and kind of kill, can shoot, can kind of torture their enemies. And in Ukraine, 22-year-old secretary Johanna Altvetter, who played an even prominent role in a massacre while working for regional commissioner Wilhelm Witze during the liquidation of Jewish ghetto, Fräulein Hannah, as she was known, was seen in her riding breeches prodding men, women and children into a trap like a cattle herder, among many other women who perpetrated violence of an extreme kind during Holocaust. In our own times, an examination of women perpetrators in the genocide in Rwanda and Abu Ghraib prison will help one to understand the role of women as perpetrators of violence. So we see, we'll examine one by one what happened in Rwanda and Abu Ghraib. The genocide of Rwanda. Rwanda is mainly made up of 3 ethnic groups: Hutu, Tutsi and Twa. Despite the differences of these ethnic groups, particularly the Hutus and the Tutsis, they traditionally mingle freely through marriage and socially. the colonial period, when this area was ruled by the German and Belgians, increased the differences between the Hutus and the Tutsis, and the enmity between the two groups started to grow. The two ethnic tribes who were so much, they were intermingling, they believed in compassion, in friendship, but with the entry of the Germans and the Belgians, the differences started. And throughout this period, till the independence in 1961, various colonial regulations and policies fueled the hostilities between the two groups and created a struggle for political power about which the group would rule Rwanda. Both the ethnic tribes wanted representation from their own tribes to form the government. So post-independence, this hostility intensified, and in 1994, after the president, who was a Hutu, his plane was shot down and the president was killed. The state machinery ordered mass murder of the Tutsis because they suspected that the Tutsis must have kind of attacked the aircraft. The ensuing reaction was a violent conflict between the two groups, in which about 50 to 10 lakh people died. Although some Hutus were killed during the conflict, it was primarily the Tutsis who had lost their lives. The violence lasted for about 100 days, and hundreds and thousands of Tutsi women were subjected to rape, gang rape, rape with objects, sexual slavery, and sexual mutilation. Shocking facts emerged in the aftermath of this violence. During Rwandan Genocide, women participated in large numbers, and women worked as the main architect of the violence and also as individual killers. They denounced the victims, looted the victims' homes as well as their bodies, and less frequently, women killed directly with a variety of modern and traditional weaponry. Women also acted as cheerleaders, and they sang songs as Tutsis were being raped and killed. So all these were done by women, which is a very different kind of a picture that we usually construct when we talk about a woman. One of these women stated, I quote, "I am accused of being there when people were being killed and singing. I admit I did it. I was there when people were being killed. I joined the animation just as I would join any other choir," unquote. Rwandan women belonging to different sections of the society betrayed Tutsis. Teachers handed over people, their own students, to the extremists and the killer groups. Doctors, nurses, their patients and nuns, the Tutsis would come to seek refuge in the monastery, in the church. But we see that, in 2001, two Rwandan nuns, Sister Gertrude and Sister Kisito, stood trial in Belgium. During the Rwandan Genocide, they chased all Tutsis out of the monastery where they had come to seek refuge and handed them over to the extremists in spite of knowing that these people would be killed. They even brought petrol, which was used to set a garage on fire, in which 600 Tutsis were killed. In Rwanda, many others like them helped and supported the killer groups by betraying the Tutsis who had come to seek refuge or shelter, thinking that their lives would be saved. Women showed the killer groups where the Tutsis were living or where they went into hiding. Women were often refused help to the victims and thus contributed to their capture and death. In some cases, Tutsi women left their children under the protection of Hutu women, but some of these women turned the children to the killer groups and they were killed. So we see how that concept of a caregiver, a caretaker simply diminishes in this kind of situation. Now let us talk about the Abu Ghraib case. We all know how the pictures of the prison guards had created a great controversy, a great uproar. Abu Ghraib was the American prison in Iraq during the war in Iraq by the American soldiers that started in 2003. In late 2003, Amnesty International and the Associated Press published a report that showed torture, physical and sexual abuse and other human rights violation of the detainees of Abu Ghraib prison by the American military. The photographs from the Abu Ghraib drew international attention on two counts. One, the violation of human rights by the USA, which holds high moral ground of being democratic and upholding human rights. Two, the photographs showed that some of the people who conducted the torture and sexually abuse on prisoners were women. So these pictures of sexual abuse and violence in Abu Ghraib prison indicate that the war on terror, the sexual humiliation and abuse of men was also an explicit war tactic. Muslim men were humiliated through the reversal of gender roles. Men were dominated by women and they were forced to pose in homosexual acts. I quote, "It's okay if they beat me. Beatings don't hurt us. It is just a blow. But no one would want their manhood to be shattered. They want us to feel as though we were women, the way women feel. And this is the worst insult, to feel like a woman." The remarkable fact about these atrocities was that some of the perpetrators were women who unashamedly used their sexuality as a weapon. These two cases show clearly that women can be perpetrators of genocide and sexual violence in war and conflict. They are not always the innocent victims or peacemakers. In Rwanda, the state powers successfully used Hutu women to kill and walk towards killing and dishonoring the Tutsi women, children and men. This willingness to kill came from the power and hatred that the Hutu women felt because of their ethnic identity. This is where the traditional gender analysis of female as peaceful and male as violent fail and the idea of intersectionality come into play. The idea of intersectionality, violence, is seen as a tool of the power one feels because of one's social position, gender, race, ethnicity, class, or religion. In case of Abu Ghraib, the discussion often portrayed the women perpetrators as mere tools manipulated by the military administration. This reading of women perpetrators reinforces gender stereotype of women as a maternal and incapable of violence and takes away agency from woman. So when we talk about the agency of woman, feminists point out that in Rwanda and Abu Ghraib, women perpetrators identified their victims as the enemy other. In Rwanda, the Hutu woman on the basis of ethnicity, and in Abu Ghraib on the basis of patriotism. So the women had their reasons. In addition, in both cases, the violence was ordered by the administration that they were faithful to. The women in this situation performed what they had perceived was their duty role: genocide and sexual assault. These women had exercised their agency in perpetration of violence, albeit with empowerment from the system which encouraged the violence. They were used as agents of violence. It is necessary to recognize this agency of women in perpetration of violence, because denial of the existence of this agency will not only result in further disenfranchising women in military or as a part of a community, but also will result in the danger of believing that violence caused by woman is less harmful than the violence caused by man. So whatever we have seen, the kind of violence that has been perpetrated by women both in Abu Ghraib and Rwanda is so heart-touching. We can never imagine that this kind of violence can be perpetrated by women. So unless and until this particular aspect is looked into, a proper study will never be done. So we cannot conclude by saying that the violence perpetrated by women are less harmful than the kind of violence perpetrated by man. To understand women as perpetrators of violence, is important to remember that violence, particularly in war, conflict, is a weapon of the patriarchal system of war itself. So to conclude, we can say that the entire society, which is a part of the belief that territory, identity and ideology should be protected using military force, is responsible. Women are a part of this socialization, and hence they too accept violence, particularly during war, conflict, as an acceptable practice. An understanding of this process through which women and men become perpetrators is useful in the effort in peacemaking, policy formulation, and to address violence. Thank you.